Right now, our lives are chaotic, in part by design but largely at fault is the ineptitude of the powers that be and their attempt to make organic nature clockwork. Given the coronavirus, riots, mass demonstrations, ongoing open and proxy wars, and the constant state of fear and worry about our future in the face of climate change, resource wars, and apocalyptic Armageddon, it should finally be clear that the world order should not be entrusted to the rich and powerful. Their world is designed to create stability at the top and continue disarray and chaos beneath them to keep wages low, demand for work high, and profit margins extreme. A large part of this chaos is also generated by the fact that they are not perfect. Politicians are no more intelligent or knowledgeable in all the areas they govern than an average person. They make plenty of mistakes. So then, in this chaotic world where the constant threat and justification of the state is that in its absence there'd be anarchy, could the supposed chaos of anarchy be worse? Anarchy gives the impression of disorder to those who only know how to look from the top down. Anarchism is a reworking of society from the bottom, without tying power and authority to any hierarchy. No masters, no gods, no capital. The end goals of anarchism are liberty, equity, and natural order. The foremost enemy of anarchism is the state, a hierarchical body with power and authority tied in the preservation of capitalism. Opposition of the state requires knowing the definition of the state. Under the Treaty of Westphalia, a few things were required of the state for it to be a state. It must have borders. Within those borders the state must have a monopoly on violence and the law, and other states must recognize their borders, local monopoly on violence, and supremacy of its rules within those borders. What happened primarily over the last 150 years is a struggle with globalization. States have made binding contracts and unions amongst one another that weaken their supremacy and their monopoly on force. And while there's certainly not an international state that has made the nation subservient, it is now very gray whether countries, particularly the smaller ones, meet the definition of a nation-state under the Westphalia Treaty. The result is what I would like to call the discrete state, which makes the dismantling and the understanding the state and state functions more difficult, but it does not essentially change the effects on the people whether it is discrete or not. As an anarchist, I deny the legitimacy of the state and all authoritative hierarchies. Armed with the definition of a state, we now have a notion of how to weaken it. These are called dual power systems. While without gods or masters, anarchism is highly organized, not chaotic. That organization will not spontaneously create itself, manifesting magically during or after a revolution. It has to be actively pursued and engineered. It is an organic system unlike the state. Ideally, it is brought into existence before capitalism's total fall so it may grow and evolve. A plant could evolve to live in brackish water instead of fresh, but if one threw it in the tributary now it would die. Dual power means acting on our own authority and existing independent of whichever state whose claimed borders we exist within. Not only is this a necessary step in revolutionary struggle, but it undermines the state's monopoly on violence and the law within its borders, and therefore its perceived legitimacy by other states. The building of these dual power systems requires an approach and a strategy. Over the last 150 years of revolutionary organizing, this was typically done by informing workers and the peasants of their rights and actual worth in society. This was to build class consciousness, an idea that lower, downtrodden, and working classes deserved their fair share of the fruits of their labors and recognizing that they owe more allegiance to their fellows than any other power, a sense of camaraderie. Through the ever march of time, the nature of class has changed because of the extreme wealth gap, wealth concentration, and the discrete state's functioning. The working class of any region is not alone in its entrapment by wage slavery. While each nation exists in an economic hierarchy on the global stage, each person in that state also exists in an economic hierarchy within it. In America, one of the wealthiest nations, the average person is 3 months from being homeless. So, while a poor American is better off than a middle-class worker in Southeast Asia, neither will eat nor have a place to stay if their luck changes. They are in the same boat of uncertainty against capitalism. This is the disorder sown by the rich to create their own stability. I would say the majority of the middle class in affluent nations, including many in non-productive work, are, in fact, wage slaves as well because of their uncertainty and inability for social mobility. Why then, is there a lacking class consciousness in the supermajority of the world? Hard work. Hard work can make the best of a situation, but who your friends and family are is the statistically most significant indicator of one's lifetime earnings. Through this fervent lie that hard work will carry you up through the rungs of life, the bourgeoisie ceased being a class and became a disease. An ailment of logic. The bubonic bourgeoisie spread down the class structure as wage slavery expanded up. The result is working class folks swearing the rich deserve their money and expanded freedom, at least partly because they feel entitled to those same privileges when their hard work pays off. The odds are more likely a working class comrade will be struck by lightning and live than ever see $1 million to their name. Class consciousness was the key to all stripes of socialist revolutions, but now the globally exported American dream outweighs the material circumstances and shared experience of their fellows. That is why the 21st century lags in growing its revolutionary potential. Fostering class consciousness is much more challenging. Entering a workplace or field, telling the toilers their rights and the path ahead is no longer viable. The old enemies, short-sightedness, complacency, and risk are compounded by surveillance, the bourgeoisie plague, tuxedo unions, and ever-amassing propaganda. Direct appeals to class consciousness have been shown the door. As fond of revolutionary syndicalism as I am, it is time to stop harping working class solidarity and direct, immediate appeals to class struggle. It falls on deaf ears outside the realm of socialism. All things left of neoconservatism have been so thoroughly demonized. The way forward is establishing a good name geographically. In the pandemic, we have seen anti-fascist groups, socialists, and good humans alike come together, embracing mutual aid and local engagement. These were brilliant moves. Community-based engagement, resistance, and solidarity is the path forward to the social revolution.